51. I'm Joe Sanak, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast, where we help you build a thriving private practice that you absolutely love. We want both sides of that. We want you to have good operations, marketing, all the things it takes to run a practice, but we don't want you to sell your soul in the middle of that. We have lots of ways that we can make money in the world, and we need to love our practices, feel like it's good for our own lives, good for our community's lives, good for our families, our clients. We need to feel proud of the work that we do and make sure that it aligns with the world that we want to create. And so we want to help you do both of those things. We do that through individual consulting. We do that through our membership community, the Practice Academy, for folks that have just got their EIN or are thinking about it. They're right at the very beginning, and we have people that have 120, 150 clinicians and everything in between. And so we want to try to give people their section of the community, their little corner of people that can support them. So if you're at any phase of practice, head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/membership, and you can read more about joining one of our different tracks depending on your phase of practice. So I am so excited today. I have Brad Larson with me, who is a PsyD and is a psychologist and CEO of Portland Mental Health and Wellness, a large equity-centered group practice in Oregon, providing psychotherapy, psychiatry, intensive outpatient care, and comprehensive training for emerging mental health professionals. Under his leadership and in close collaboration with his leadership team, they have been known for integrating decolonial, trauma-informed, and community-based approaches to care. Brad's deeply committed to fostering relational workplaces where clinical excellence and human dignity go hand in hand. Grounded in the belief that humility is essential to effective leadership, he strives to model and cultivate a culture of humble, learning oriented leadership across the practice. His work centers on building systems that advance equity, sustainability, and meaningful care for patients, providers, and admin staff alike. Welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast, Brad.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
well, before we got going, you said this is your very first podcast. And so I'm like, man, I am so excited to introduce Brad to the world.
Oh, thank you. You hearing that, what you just read back to at me, I was like, oh God, that sounds like a lot. How are we going to talk about all this?
Got some big shoes to fill, man.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to hear more of just like the development of Portland mental health and wellness. How has
Mhm.
that grown? When did it start? Like, what have you seen scale within it?
Yeah, we started out of my solo practice back in 2011. Fairly shortly after getting full, I'm kind of a builder. So I was like, what now? What next? What more can I do? And I really have a long history practicing and training in Gestalt therapy. So I wanted to kind of begin to build a space where Gestalt therapists could practice together in a supported environment and really feel cherished in the workplace. And so we started hiring a couple of therapists. Um, and pretty quickly, I started to learn some hard lessons. I had this vision and these values, and I had not so many of the skills I ended up needing to realize those. Um, we also began to develop a training program in the early years to meet requirements for the state of Oregon to provide supervision for licensure and to train graduate students. So the addition of clinicians and the training programs kind of came together in the mid-teens
Mm,
while I was still trying to figure out how to lead. In the early days, it was like, how do we make payroll? Right? Every week was like, and these were the early days when payroll was maybe $5,000. It wasn't a lot of money at the time, and I was just like, sweating bullets trying to make payroll work. Um, but over the years, we kind of just kept persevering and kept adding programs and staff, and then admin staff and supervisors. It just kept kind of ballooning from there.
mm.
Um, so
Man, I
yeah,
can't
and
wait to
here.
dig into like the leadership side and management side of 130 plus, clinicians and staff. Like, that's just a beast to take care of. That's a lot of lives and families and salaries to focus on. But I want
Yeah.
to kind of zoom into kind of what drives your leadership, because before we started recording, we were talking about Buddhism, we were talking about Gestalt theory, and
Mhm.
just how that informs you as a leader. So maybe kind of let us into Brad's brain a little bit as to how that is kind of at the core of the way that you lead, the way that you think about business.
Yeah, so I encountered both Gestalt therapy and Nietzsche and Buddhism at about the same time in my life, almost 25 years ago. and philosophically found they were really complementary. So in terms of Gestalt therapy, there's a real value for honoring the person just as they are. And the philosophy and the practice supports really um, creating the conditions that allow for the clients or the consultee that you're working with to be able to be fully and more of who they are. And I really like that sentiment that therapy is about becoming more of who you are. It's not about changing who you are. So philosophically, that really resonated with me. And then my Buddhist practice was really one that I echoed the same sentiment. How do you engage in a process that in that tradition is referred to as human revolution? How do you kind of polish your life to reveal the shining jewel that, that all of us are? All of us have kind of this highest condition of life that exists in us. And that practice is about revealing what's already present. It's not about attaining or reaching for something to one day be good enough. It's about
Mm.
revealing what's already there. So for me, that was very much in alignment with Gestalt therapy. And because I started practicing so young, I think that just began to inform the way that I see the world. And when I moved into taking on responsibilities in different organizations and then ultimately leadership in Portland Mental Health and Wellness, it felt just very natural for me to see my responsibilities to my employees through that lens. How do I really cherish their lives? How do I offer opportunities for learning and growing and cultivating, kind of all of who they are?
Yeah.
Um,
Now,
so-
what are some of the practices that kind of support that form of Buddhism of accepting people kind of how they are? That's maybe different than other
Mhm.
forms of Buddhism or other ways that maybe people tend to think.
I think that there's the concrete practices. So the daily practice is chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and for me, that's a practice that is kind of like an external manifestation of this idea of polishing my life. And then that the principle is that, as I develop and polish my life, my environment will be reflecting that life condition. So I'm able to, or the intention being, I want to be humble about it, but the intention being that, that I have a positive influence and impact on the folks who are in my environment. But that can also be a form of intention setting or prayer, even to chant for and about others, their happiness, their well being, their growth, their security, and their safety. So I don't emphasize this uh, so much in the workplace, like, oh, I'm praying for you or I'm chanting for you, right? This is a very
Sure.
personal process. But the essence or the spirit of that, I try to bring into my work every day. Really being curious and interested in other folks who are working for me. Just really, how are you? Simple things like, how are you? I'm so glad you're here today. What are you needing? And I have found that really is quite moving to people, just to take that beat and be interested and curious, and being available for support and care.
Mm.
Um, I've always, I don't know, I just kind of like think differently. Maybe it's neurodivergence, I don't know. But I've always emphasized taking care of my employees and haven't really focused a ton on like patient care and outcomes. I know group practices may do have that focus. I have just by default kind of focused on employees and trusting that will kind of pass on to really great patient care.
Yeah.
So.
I guess I'm wondering how that philosophy of like kind of accepting people how they are, and then as a manager, CEO, there's times you have to have difficult conversations. You didn't do your progress notes. Like I'm not gonna
Mhm.
like if I'm supervising you, Brad, and I'm just like, yeah, I need to accept who you are at your core, and also what you're doing. We need to work on. We need to have you do your progress notes. Like how
Mhm.
does that maybe
Mhm.
help you in just like general management, and how is it also maybe like challenge maybe general management for people?
Yeah, I'm gonna sort of name three things. There's personalizing, there's systems thinking, and then there's invitation. So it took me a lot of years to stop personalizing things and not to get like personally emotionally activated. Like, why won't you do this thing? It's so simple. Please just do your notes because it's not personal. If folks could do it easy, they would be doing it. And so I had to really get interested and curious a little bit more in terms of what's going on for them. Um, the systems thinking piece is and we really have tried to emphasize this culturally, what's the system issue first? Even if it's just one clinician on a team that's struggling, I still want to start with what's the system issue? Where is there a blockade or a barrier that they're not really able to overcome? And then we might need to assess that first. And the last is invitation. We can really only invite our employees to engage in what we're expecting of them. And we can do all the work to offer the supports and the feedback and the infrastructure. But in the end, they may not be able to meet that invitation. And so sometimes that conversation is hard, and sometimes it is, we're putting you on a PIP. We got to talk about, remediation. And sometimes it's like, this is not a good fit. And even in that spirit, I try to look at it like, if this isn't right for you, is there something we can offer for you to find the right place to go? Right.
Hmm. So take me into what it takes to run a practice of 130 plus people. That's a whole lot of people.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is like a really rock solid leadership team. Um, a few years ago, it really transitioned from me kind of knowing everything that was going on and knowing everyone's situation and what needed to be attended to just not having the capacity personally to do that. And I had to really allow the leadership team to take ownership of taking care of, supporting, and holding accountability for their teams and their departments. So I think cultivating really great leadership and giving people opportunity to step into leadership is been essential.
Now, when you look at stepping into leadership, is that something that kind of you prefer to hire from within? You prefer to kind of rise up from within because they already know the culture? Like, when are you thinking, it's better to bring someone from outside of here to kind of shake things up? Like, how do you
Hmm.
make that kind of decision?
Carefully, I suppose, right? There's leadership roles that really need a person who can hold some of the institutional history and has been around and knows kind of what's going on. Our COO came on as a patient care coordinator 5 years ago, right? So she's really gone from an entry level position
Yeah.
to the very top. And a lot of she has so many strengths, but one of her strengths is really just holding the whole system. She really, knows it inside and out.
Mhm.
And then if it's like maybe a new position, new leadership role, or a new program that our folks internally may not have the experience or the skill set, or maybe not even the interest. And so then we have to look externally. And that's harder because you're not always sure what you're going to get in real time when they come on board. So we, especially for those external hires, we've also learned to get extraordinarily clear in ourselves what it is we're needing, what we're wanting, what we're expecting, and then trying to clearly articulate that in the recruiting and hiring process.
Mm. Um, when people are kind of mid-size, so they're in the like 10 to 20, so they've gone past the growing pains of early group practice. Maybe they have a clinical director, maybe a couple clinical supervisors. They're starting to build that team. If you were to go back to that and say, wow, I did some things I accidentally did right, and I did some things I definitely did wrong. Like, what would you
Yeah.
advise someone that's going from that, say, 20 to 50 or so range? So, about half your
Mhm.
size. Like, what would you advise them?
Yeah. What comes to mind is that I felt like there was so much at stake to make sure that people were happy, and
Mm,
and then I would engage in like attempts to just make people happy no matter what, even if that was sacrificing real boundaries or needs or expectations for the practice as a whole. So I think I had to start thinking, I had to start adding to my thinking the needs of the whole organization and not just the individual people.
mm,
Um, and so I think being willing to do the hard personal work, I mean, I'm a person who struggled with this a lot, but to be really clear about expectations and name them very clearly and follow up with accountability. And I had to really work through that. That's not the same as like being mean or being critical or being hard, right? And paradoxically, in the end, yeah, holding clarity about expectations and deadlines and consequences and feedback actually is way more securing to my staff than uncertainty about what's going to happen if I miss the mark or if I'm not doing what I think I'm supposed to be doing. there's a lot more anxiety with that ambiguity for staff. Is
Yeah.
that making sense?
Yeah. Well, and I wonder how it works with that large of a staff. Like you used a term in your bio of kind of decolonizing, which I want to dig into more. What does that mean to your team? Obviously, like there's people that know what that means, maybe don't. That might be a new term to them. Want to kind of dig
Yeah.
into that a little bit more. But like that's a term that tends to be more of a progressive lens. And so with 120 or 130 clinicians, like, do you find that kind of putting a stake in the ground and saying, and maybe stake in the ground is colonizing language. Actually, it probably is. It's probably
Mm.
when we took over the
Good
Western
catch.
frontier.
Yeah.
I'm questioning everything I say. But as you make decisions as to what as a business you guys stand for,
Yeah.
how do you both respect people's independent thinking and also say these are things that we as a business stand for? You're either on or you're off, kind of that direction. Like, how do you think through that?
Yeah, it's a really big question, and I think we've been figuring it out over time. When we first started really intentionally doing DEAI work in 2019, I think we really just struggled with the basics of what does that even mean for us? What does it mean to do that work? And we learned early on that unless the leadership at the top were doing their personal work to understand colonization and power and privilege and white supremacy culture, there was no way that we could invite the rest of the organization to do that and not cause further harm. So
Mm,
individuals had to become more tuned into just kind of their own impact on others. Um, and I think that we are still in the midst of trying to really live those values as an organization. Everyone who comes into the organizations brings their own institutional transference, their own social, history and experience, their own racial trauma, and I would say we are like 85% marginalized identified staff in one form or another. So there's a lot people are bringing in. So I would say at this point, we don't have sort of hard and fast rules about behavior and language and this is what's right and this is what's wrong in terms of a decolonizing lens. That's actually colonizing, right? I think we're trying to maintain the conversation and continuing to engage the conversation as best we can.
mhm,
In more concrete ways, some of our training programs have actually begun to take the training philosophy of Gestalt therapy and the methodology of Gestalt therapy and recognize that it aligns quite well with a decolonizing approach. So a lot of three of our training programs are beginning to develop very specific decolonizing approaches to therapy for early grads.
mm. What does that look like when you say the leadership at the top is kind of doing their own work? Like, are there specific books that you guys are reading, podcasts? Like, what are you talking about in therapy? I'm thinking like for myself,
Hmm.
not that it's ever done, but I do some of my own work, but also it's like, well, what I don't think I know what I'm missing, especially living in
Yeah,
northern Michigan.
100%.
Literally, there's like hardly any people of color here, and so it's like I don't even have opportunities to like challenge myself and challenge my biases unless I travel. And so I'm just wondering, like,
Yeah.
what are things that you would say are just some of the maybe choose your own adventure? It's not necessarily a recipe, like here's the 5 things you have to do, but just like things that you would have people consider.
I think, we engaged a couple of consultant pairs over the first maybe let's say the last like 5 or 6 years um, that were challenging. They didn't quite, kind of somehow we didn't quite line up with one another. That consultation wasn't so helpful, and it was challenging. But we did do. The leadership team still meets every other Thursday for 2 hours to engage in some form of DEI work. And we spent 2 years going through a curriculum called White Supremacy Culture in Organizations. And we would look at some of the principles of white supremacy culture. And this is really important because it's not naming when and how you're a white supremacist or you're a racist or you're a good or a bad person. It's naming phenomena that we all experience regardless of our identities or marginalized status. We all uphold them and we all suffer from them. And these can be things like there's one right way to do something, all or nothing thinking, moving with urgency unnecessarily, And these principles really we began to dive into where they show up in us personally and in our just in our kind of the way we move day to day as leaders. And then we also look at it in terms of policy and practice and the way we operate as an organization, the contracts we choose to pursue or the grants we choose to pursue, that kind of thing. And that was really quite meaningful. It was grounding. It gave us some real context to dig into. And it also helped to reduce, to some extent, some reactivity that can come up, certainly for white people in particular, when we're doing work around racial identity and privilege. It can be super activating. And we didn't want to pretend that's not real and avoid it, but we wanted to find a way in to have more of a rich discussion and discovery. And we're still doing it. Well, still always be doing it because I think there's always more to discover as a leadership team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What have been some challenges in your leadership, maybe not your personal, but in other people on your team, where you really realize like, oh, I didn't really know what I was doing there. I definitely like need to shift things. Like, I guess
Hmm.
if everything flows from the top, which I think in a lot of ways it does, if your top leaders aren't kind of the glue, they're not setting the direction, they're not an extension of what your vision for the practice is, it's going to be all over the place. And so,
Hmm. Hmm.
when did the team miss the mark? Maybe that's my real question. And then how did you fix it?
Yeah, I really appreciate this miss the mark language. We use that language because we don't really want to talk about it as like you got it wrong or you messed up or whatever. It's really missing the mark and what needs to adjust. And I've seen over the years, leaders that kind of just behind me developmentally. So it's been great because I go, oh, I know that you're trying to make everyone happy, or you're afraid to hold accountability because something you're afraid of what might unfold. So I think that's where we could do differently and better is being clear about expectations, holding accountability, leading with curiosity, but also I think right with curiosity is that clarity of expectation and accountability.
Mm,
Um, I think that just stirs up so much for people. If I hold you accountable because you're not doing what we're asking you to do, you're not going to like me, or you'll be upset with me, or there'll be conflict. That's can be so scary for all of us. Right now, that's kind of what I'm seeing. The other thing that comes to mind is about delegation. Like I have to do it all, and really inviting people to not me, the leader saying, I have to do everything, really encouraging them to delegate and to really be clear for themselves. What is it I have to do personally, and what can I ask, an emerging leader to do? What can I ask, an admin? What's an opportunity for someone to level up? Can I give them this project, rather than trying to do it all themselves?
mm. Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about how many people we consult with that are in that, 50 to 100 clinician phase, and how most of their stories fall into two categories. It's either they have some pretty fast growth and then they plateau, and then they have another kind of fast growth, but that second fast growth is usually more intentional. Like we want to hire 13 people this month, or
Hmm.
we have our systems down, and then fast growth, and then plateau, get our systems down, and it's sort of just like just like growth plateau, growth
Yeah.
plateau. And then the other one that I see is growth and then kind of stepping back. So they might lose a bunch of team members that really aren't on board. And then it's kind of
Hmm.
more like the stock market. Like it goes up and then it kind of goes down, up and down, but it overall has the upward growth.
Yeah.
What I typically see is there's a few moments when people say, "Man, I should just throw in the towel. I'm just sick of this. Like, why am I building it this big? Do I need to keep pushing it?"
Yeah.
And that's usually when they step either into a plateau time or a downward trend time, because they either stop kind of focusing on it and then you see the downward, or they just say, "Okay, we just need to take a breath," and they get more of the plateau. I'm
Yeah.
interested, are there any moments when you felt like, I think I just want to throw in the towel, I want to sell it, I want to just like step back from leadership? What was that moment like? And then how did you get through it to then keep going?
Right, you say, "What was that moment like?" I'm like, "How many of those moments
You're
can I
like,
tell you about?"
every Monday.
Right. I think I mentioned we're negotiating a contract with a Medicaid payer right now, and today was a day I was like, "Why am I doing this? This is just awful." So, I think that I know about myself personally that I just really enjoy building, and I enjoy the challenge. Like, yeah, some days I'm just like, "This is I should just sell and get out of this." But I think I enjoy it quite a bit. And I know that I'll come back to kind of the vibrance of it. Um, I also think that in the hardest moments, there have been some key people that I feel like can hold the vision and the passion and the interest, the excitement for what we're doing with me, so that I don't have to just like either throw in the towel or like keep pushing.
Mhm.
So there's an opportunity for me to kind of refresh as well. Um, oh gosh, there was something else I wanted to name, but I've lost it. So yeah.
It's all good. Um, you can always come back on the show. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that in any career path, we should be asking ourselves, why am I doing this? And it's like
Hmm.
those times when we say, I really don't want to do the clinical work anymore. I really don't want to do as much of the clinical supervision or the operations or the marketing or whatever your phase of practice is, unless you're brand new and need to take on all that risk and need to wear all those hats, usually you can start to hand those things off. And so I think that
Hmm.
evaluation of, you know, kind of making the case to yourself of why is Brad still a CEO? Why is Brad still building this
Right.
thing is a great thing to think through.
It is, and you mentioned selling, and one of the things that we're positioning ourselves to do is become an ESOP, which is a employee stock owned plan, which means essentially that our employees are going to own the company. So we do have this kind of exit vision. It's a longer runway, but um, to me, that also helps me go like, yeah, I'm not going to do this too much past my mid 50s, and then I'll move on to something else. But I also I delegate stuff, I hand stuff off, and then I create more work for myself because it's exciting and it's interesting. Let's build something, another program or another thing. And so I've come to accept that about myself, that I'll just keep doing.
Yeah. I mean, even me, like, things were, they're going great with practice of the practice. And then I decided, what would happen if I started a group practice working only 2 hours a week to just see what I would do and then publicly talk about it in the podcast? And, so I'm on week 8 right now. The website just went live. We're getting the system set up from scratch because I sold mine back in 2019. And I thought, well, and I'm not going to do any clinical work. But still, it's like, well, maybe I do want to do clinical work. Maybe I want to see two
Hmm.
clients a week. And it's just like, same sort of thing. You just kind of keep adding things on there. So,
Yep. Yeah, I really identify with that.
well, the last question I always ask, Brad, is if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
What comes to mind is like if you're a private practitioner working for a group practice, your group practice owner 99 times out of 100 has your best interests at heart. They want you to do really great work and to feel really good and feel supported. And sometimes that's really hard to see as an employee. So I think that's really important to me. And on the flip side of that, for the owners, I think is to recognize that there are going to be times that you're going to feel like I'm just trying to do everything I can for you, and somehow it's not meeting the mark for my employees. That those times come and they go, and it's okay, and you're still doing fine. Like you don't have to do this perfectly. It's really hard. It's really hard work, but it's also so rewarding.
Mhm. So good. Brad, if people want to connect with you, where should we send them?
I'm not on social media at all, but you can go to our website, portlandmh.com, and then my email, brad@portlandmh.com.
Mm. So awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I think one of the misconceptions out in the world is that mega group practice owners somehow have like a secret sauce. And yes, Brad obviously has done some things right, but I think also in talking, with so many large group practice owners, to just realize a lot of it is they just keep doing it. They keep going after it. They keep looking for new opportunities. They try to make sure their staff feel connected. They have a vision for it, and they keep going. So if you feel discouraged in your group practice, maybe it's time to be in community with some people. We would love to have you in the Practice Academy. We have hundreds of therapists that are in there that own their practices from, small solo practices all the way up to mega practices. We would love to get to know you and help you feel surrounded by people at your same phase of practice. You can read more over at practiceofthepractice.com/membership. Also, we couldn't do the show without our sponsors. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon.